All right, guys, welcome to our This Week in Crypto stream for July 14th, 2023. Another great week in the books. Huge surges from XRP, obviously. They really took the crypto world by storm after a huge victory for them in their SEC lawsuit, where the US government granted them as a non security, making it much more appealing to hold XRP for people who were worried about some financial restrictions resulting from XRP being deemed a security, and now they don't need to worry about that. And it's kind of a signal for all of crypto to an extent, right? Because if XRP is to not be considered a security, then others down the line that act in similar fashions to XRP or have similar technology, if they were to be attacked by the U.S. government for whatever reason for having for having security features, um, people can now point to XRP as kind of the template for how to successfully handle these kinds of attacks. So great news for crypto overall. Obviously, it's hard to argue that this is anything but bullish with this news coming in. And obviously, the reaction was overwhelming for XRP. At one point, it had jumped over 80% in a single 24-hour period. In fact, a 3-hour period is when it did almost all of its surging after the news broke. It obviously has retraced a little bit since then, but you can see that it's still up 66% over the past week, which is pretty groundbreaking and shocking, with most people not expecting an asset like XRP to have this kind of pop. Many, even with this news, were a little surprised that it surged as much as it did. While you can say others are surprised it hasn't doubled since. So sentiment is all over the place for XRP, and I think it's as I said, it's certainly trickling into other assets. You can see Stellar up 50% over the past week, Hex 37%, Synthetics back in the top 100 at plus 29%. Bitcoin had a small gain, but as you guys could have seen from the thumbnail, this small gain was enough to bring them past that key resistance that they kept hitting around 31.2 to 31.3K. And it got all the way up to 31.7K yesterday. It's down a little bit again today, but even still, this was a good sign if you're a technical trader in particular, because this was indeed a higher high that was much needed to signify that there could be a bigger breakout to 35K or 40K now. Oftentimes it just takes a one mini barrier break like we've seen, and that can eventually signal that we will be rising to much higher pastures here in the future. So great to see Bitcoin doing well. Ethereum did just a tad better at plus 7%. It did break 2,000 yesterday. It's now back at 1995. So I wouldn't be surprised if it dances around that 2,000 area, maybe going below and above it several times over the next few days. Obviously, we can expect that the weekend can calm down. It doesn't mean that there is going to be a retrace, but obviously less volume, less daily active addresses. So, there's obviously exceptions to this, but most times after a big kind of fireworks show with many prices doing what they've been doing at the end of the week, the weekend is kind of a cool down period. So don't be surprised if 12 hours from now things are finally calming down here. But for the next 12 hours, it can still be huge, and we may see some very interesting things happen. And we'll dive into the metrics here. A few others that we can show. Cardano up 22%. Solana had a huge week at plus 32%. Most of their rising happened toward the beginning of the week. Matic plus 25%, Avalanche plus 21, Stellar plus 50, as I already mentioned that one. So you guys get the idea. Lots and lots of huge gainers. And this up here is social volume change from this past week compared to the week before it. And Bitcoin is being talked about at a 35% higher frequency than it was the week before, which is great. Ethereum plus 23%. Look at Tether being talked about more than double the amount that it did the week before. We can talk about that a little on this call. There's some interesting Tether metrics going around, and there was also an insight I wrote about stablecoins at the beginning of the week. Obviously, XRP, as you'd expect, look at this social volume change, plus 663% compared to the week before. Pretty staggering there. So, all right, with that being said, we can take a look at Bitcoin, of course. I'm also going to set aside a tab to look at XRP so we can see exactly what is going on here. We shall do Bitcoin first and then move to XRP. Then we'll talk about some stable coins. And I'd also like to bring up some of our recent insights as well. Okay. So first and foremost, what has been happening with Bitcoin? Why has it risen? How should we react and expect for things to be moving forward over the next week or so? Well, transaction volume is pretty much normal, nothing outside the realm of unexpected here. If we look at utility, we do see that daily active addresses have actually been declining. From July 7th being at 1.03 million daily active addresses to just yesterday being at 872K. Yeah, that's a little bit of a concern. We would like to see to support this kind of price rise that's been going on, right? If I draw a line, just, estimating here something like that as the average for the price and something like this for daily active addresses, that's a bit of a bearish divergence, right? We don't want to see utility starting to lag behind, especially if prices are rising going into it. That's we need to see more daily active addresses and circulation in order to justify that prices belong where they do and can continue to rise to even better market values in the future. MVRV wise, if we look at the 30-day, we can see that it's at about plus 5.5% for the shorter terms and 28% for the longer terms. So slightly concerning. I wouldn't say this is any sort of danger zone here, but generally speaking, you don't want to be adding on to positions too much if you're seeing that both the short term and the long term are a little bit inflated and higher than the resting average, which would be 0%. So between those two and even this blue one here, which is the MVRV ratio Z-score, that's up at about 0.8. If it ever gets up to like 1, which is like a standard deviation above normal, that would be a big danger zone. For now, it's just mildly concerning because across short, mid, and long-term timeframes, there is a major amount of gains and not a lot of losses for the average traders out there. Funding rates. We are seeing a little bit of bullishness going on, or I should say euphoria / FOMO, where people are certainly trying to long Bitcoin, expecting it to rise after it essentially just broke this 14-month high. 13-month high, I should say. June of 2022 was the last time we were above this level. So yeah, we're seeing a high spike on DYDX with some longs. Binance is kind of at its normal rate here, but it is a little, there are some longs by default, and we'd like to see that maybe people are trying to short. That would signal that it's more likely we see a bit of a rise. And BitMEX is about even. Deribit actually, I mean, the axis may be a little deceiving here, but that is a little bit high. So we are seeing some longs there as well. So it looks like there's a little euphoria going on the funding rate side right now. And we can look at it for some other assets too. Why don't we do that really quick? So here we go. We see a couple shorts sticking out like Compound and Binance Coin, but for the most part, people are either neutral or long on most assets here. We see Ripple slash XRP being the notable outlier. We know why. People are very excited about the SEC decision. So a lot of people are longing and trying to, leverage as much of their funds toward this asset as they can. Historically speaking, this does not work out well. We would need to see a little bit of a cool down period so there isn't so much longing going on. Oftentimes, these can get liquidated if there's a bit of a price drop, and that can add to how much the price drops. So, if and when that happens, and you start to see the funding rate even out, that would be the signal that typically shows that it's kind of safe to get back into XRP and buy at a historically good time. Besides that, on the Bitcoin side, we can see that the $1 million or more transactions are quite high. You can see the rise that had been happening since really mid-May. We're going on about 2 months here with a pretty notable increase in whale transactions. If we zoom out to, let's say, the last year, you can see that it's still kind of playing catch up compared to what we saw back in late 2022. Big slump at the very end of 2022. This was after the FTX collapse happened. Then we rebounded. And then you can see how whale transactions kind of declined and then price lagged behind it. That's why this is such a good alpha metric. Whales were not participating too much until right around May 20th or so, May 21st. Then we see this big increase that foreshadows a price increase. What do you know? So whales were kind of leading the charge by doing less and less accumulation going into, or transactions, I should say, going into April. And then they resume in late May after the price drops down to that 27, 26K range or so. So yeah, I think the whale transactions are a great thing to continue to keep watching because they show just how, well, they show the interest level, I should say, of their own accumulating and dumping. And what you don't want to see is disinterest, where they don't want to do either one. And then to give more context, we can look at the 3 key tiers. We've got 10 to 100 BTC wallets, 100 to 1,000 BTC wallets, and 1,000 to 10,000 BTC wallets. Kind of underwhelming. I mean, we're definitely happy to see that the 10 to 100 tier is continuing to rise, being back around 140K after kind of fluctuating below it a little here. 100 to 1,000, this is the one I'm most concerned about because we did see this big drop off going all the way back to the early part of February. And it's kind of been flat ever since mid-April. So 2 months or 3 months straight of ranging for these whale addresses. And then finally, we have the 1,000 to 10,000, and they are accumulating a bit. There's a few more addresses compared to what we saw back in early March or so. We can also just take a look at the percentage held of all of the addresses ranging between 10, those smaller shark addresses, all the way to 10,000, which are the larger whale addresses. If you go beyond 10,000, that typically is where you start to see mostly exchange addresses. So that is why we have the cutoff point at about 10,000 Bitcoin, which is just doing the rough math, 10,000 times 30,000 is, what is that for? So 8 zeros or so. We're talking about 30 billion or so dollars. No. I've got to check now. It's going to drive me crazy. 10,000 times, just roughly, we're talking about 300. Yeah, $300 million. Thank you, Google. So yeah, we're at least moving back in the right direction here. You can see it's sort of flattened out ever since late June and then flattened out Overall, the trend of the big dumping that had been going on all the way back since October 2021, I'll show you. So yeah, this is where they started dumping. They were holding over 72% of the supply in October, then dropped down all the way to 66% of the supply. That's a big drop. A little under 6% of the total supply no longer being held. And now it's back up to 67, but obviously still a long way to go to get back up there. So the confidence and optimism that we're hoping to see from sharks and whales, not quite there yet. That being said, we're at least no longer in that huge dump range that we were in for so long. We can call this kind of a small victory where we're at least moving back in the right direction for the key stakeholders of the top crypto asset by market cap. I'll come back to the ratio of on-chain transaction volume and profit to loss shortly. There's some interesting things to look at there. Mean dollar invested age, as I zoom back in here to the last 6 months, you can see some flattening out. We talked about this in last week's show as well. It's a promising sign. Until things start to really drop, if we start seeing the mean dollar invested age curve go down, that's when we're really excited, because it's going to show that we are seeing a ton of dormant coins finally moving, and the stagnation of Bitcoin's circulation is finally starting to dissipate, and we're going back up. So if you look at the NVT model, which looks at the circulation compared to the market cap, yeah, I mean, we're still in a big red zone here, and that's a concern. That being said, this is showing only up till May. So I do need to, let me see if I can do a quick update. We're showing July there. Showing July there. Could just be a matter of adding a few. Goes up to row 100. Aha, that's all it is. So we're going to do this. This. This is the beauty of Google Sheets, folks. So just as a reminder, all of these Sandsheets models that I'm showing, anything that's on Google Sheets right now, these are available as long as you're a Sandbase Pro member. So you can absolutely jump on and explore these yourself. And as we can see, there actually was a little bit of an encouraging sign here in June, where we actually got into that semi-bearish range, and now we're back in bearish range again. So there's a little bit of teasing going on, and that was a good sign. But overall, I mean, we're still nowhere near the green zones that we need to be. These trend lines are basically where the bars need to be under, and if they're above them, that means that we're not quite getting the amount of unique tokens moving around on the network that we need to see. And that is one of the big pillars of any rise, is seeing that utility and actual usage of the asset is starting to tick up. All right. I also want to look at MVRV here for a minute, and we'll still finish off with a few Bitcoin metrics shortly. So we can see that Binance Coin is severely underbought at the moment. I want to be sure about why, though. Let me check really quick. It could be some weirdness with our MVRV. No, I think it's legitimate, because Binance Coin really has dropped off significantly compared to the rest of the markets right now. If we look at like the price versus Bitcoin for Binance Coin, it's awful. It's even worse than the regular USD price. So yeah, Binance Coin is looking like one of the worst performing altcoins out there among the top 100 to 200 or so. And that's why it's showing this big underbought signal. Obviously, invest in your own risk, but MVRV is a nice way to kind of look at multiple timeframes in this model's case, and see how average traders are doing compared to each other. And most are, after the big surges this week, kind of in that either semi-underbought or semi-overbought range or somewhere in between. So we're kind of back, if we were to average all these out, it's pretty neutral, right? Maybe even slightly overbought with a little more severe overbought signals than underbought signals. But there are plenty of opportunities still out there. We can see right here, League of Kingdoms has been lagging behind big time. Barnbridge, these are not the most known assets, I realize, but these are all available on Binance and can be traded. Dodo, Phelan Network, Radical, Serum, Storage, Superfarm, just to name a few. And the ones to be a little bit concerned about would be Synthetics, STPT, XRP, obviously, after it went on its big surge, but we know that that was for a fundamental reason related to the lawsuit. Maker, Litecoin has had a nice time, and by the way, they're just a little over 2 weeks away, 2.5 weeks away from its big halving. So keep that in mind. Injective Protocol, Compound, and Bitcoin Cash. These are the ones that have kind of surged significantly as of late and have made it so that the average trader returns are well in profit, making them a higher risk to invest in. Okay, going back to a few more Bitcoin metrics here. Let's make sure I get back on BTC and not BNB. So we had mean dollar invested age. Realized profit loss, we look at little tiny spikes like this or like this when we're at kind of a drop. And when you see a drop along with a realized loss spike like this, that's a nice signal that we may be recovering shortly. And that's what we saw here. We even saw that here. This one was interesting because we had a big bounce and then a slight drop. And just on that slight drop, it looks like people moved their assets at a loss and just realized it from this small gain here and said that's good enough. And this realized loss likely helped propel the price upward there. This would be more of a top signal because it was a positive spike. This, of course, was the biggest top signal. This one was interesting because it happened prior to one final drop off, and then we had this huge surge. That's not typical. Usually the big spike happens at the drop off point, but either way, it still could be viewed as a signal that helped show that we were going to rise there in mid-March. So yeah, I mean, we had one final realized loss spike that was relatively minor, and that was helping to push up the price to break that resistance level of 31.2, 31.3K. Supply and exchanges. If we look at that, we can see that the percentage of BTC on exchanges is at 6.07%. Exchange flow balance is about even again now. But yeah, this is still incredible to see. We're on the verge of potentially breaking below 6% now. And if we go back to 2016 or so, we can see the last time that supply and exchanges was this low and in the 5 to 6% range was December 2017. And obviously, the lower the supply and exchanges, theoretically, the better because we have less big sell-offs to worry about with BTC being stored away and hodled as opposed to on the brink of being moved and taken out of people's wallets. Another thing to note would be social dominance. Let's zoom back into the last 3 months or so. And we do see that on July 10th, this was the highest percentage of discussion related to BTC in about a month and a half. Back in mid-May was the last time we were here. Generally, we want to see high social dominance for Bitcoin because that is a sign of fear, believe it or not, because when people are euphoric and excited, they're much more likely to look at, the meme coins out there, the ones that are speculative and maybe are rising and falling due to inorganic reasons. Whereas Bitcoin, it's such a large asset that it's rare for it to see a huge pump due to just a random pump and dump group on Telegram. There might be a whale pump and dump group out there that we're never going to find out about that some of the millionaires and billionaires are part of. But overall, Bitcoin's social dominance is generally going to be a good sign because it's indicating that people are staying in the less volatile asset in crypto because of their fear of risk and having a big drop happen, and knowing that Bitcoin will not drop as much as like Pepe or Doge or Shiba or something like that. Still waiting a little bit longer before we start getting into weighted sentiment metrics. In case you don't know why, there was a Twitter API update a little over a month ago, and we're waiting for a little more time to fill in so that we have some normalized data to compare our current sentiment metrics to what the sentiment looked like at the beginning of the API change, if that makes sense. Development activity kind of declining, but take it with a grain of salt with Bitcoin. The information we even have on Bitcoin's coding team is kind of limited. Now that said, I want to look at the ratio of on-chain transaction volume and profit to loss. And yeah, we're seeing this big spike here all of a sudden. You can expect that with XRP, even though I will say, so this orange line here is XRP. You can see that it kind of got to a similar spot in late May, early June. I actually thought it would be a lot higher. I thought that there'd be a lot more profit taking than there is right now. Yes, this is still a huge spike and something we should be concerned about, but I thought it would be like over 2 indicated. So these numbers mean like anything above 1 means there's twice as many profit transactions compared to lost transactions. Anything above 2 means there's 3 times as much. So this is just a little over twice as much right now, which is not bad. So not as much of a top signal for XRP as you may think, at least for this particular metric. And we will still explore XRP here momentarily. The Ethereum ratio also looks to be quite high. I would theorize that the reason is because ETH recently passed $2,000 just yesterday, and many people set limit orders for those big round numbers. So they simply had automated profit taking that was going on, causing the amount of profit transactions compared to lost transactions to be very high. Bitcoin here, not too significant. Obviously, there is more profit taking going on than loss taking. And in fact, this is actually the highest it's been in the last 3 months. If I go back, I won't bother, but there were bigger ones at the beginning of the year. So this is a mild concern. Obviously, if Bitcoin's profit taking gets too high, that can lead to a top that doesn't only affect it, but all of crypto. We also can see that, I want to make sure I'm looking at the right one. Yeah, so this is Litecoin. Litecoin is just slightly above, so it's kind of cooled down a little bit. And finally, Cardano has had a pretty decent week itself, so it's a little bit in profit territory as well. Okay, so now we can take a look at XRP and see what's here. Obviously, there were some huge anomalous spikes. I'm going to, instead of looking at Sandbase, let's take a look at the article that I posted yesterday. We did a little research on what caused the spike. I mean, the obvious answer, of course, is the SEC decision, or sorry, the SEC lawsuit that resulted in the court's decision to declare XRP as not a security. Great news, of course, but there's still a lot of on-chain and social stories that we can look into to get a better picture of whether this lasts, whether it's going to be very temporary. Let's look into it. And I highly recommend reading this article in full if you guys can. It's free for everyone, whether you have a Sandbase Pro membership or not. And let's look at social dominance first. So this was a huge, huge spike in discussion rate. Obviously, when the 5th ranked market cap asset is being talked about at over 7% of a rate, that is a huge, huge spike that is very abnormal. Especially when Bitcoin is usually hogging the spotlight and getting a third of discussion itself. So this was the highest the social dominance of XRP had been since January of 2021. That's a 2.5-year high, folks. Very big deal. So that tells us that the mainstream crowd is a bit too focused on XRP. They're recognizing it obviously for the right reasons with the judge declaration, but we would want to see, if you're a bull on XRP or you're looking to invest in it, you don't want to see the mainstream crowd super into an asset after it just jumped 60, 70, 80% over a short period of time. You want to wait for maybe some small drop to happen, or at least for the crowd to become a little bit disinterested compared to where they are here. I wouldn't expect that, social dominance is going to drop for it within a day or two, but we may eventually see, by next week, it start to be more normalized around 3% or so. We'll see. Whale transactions, huge spike. As expected, you have tons and tons of assets being moved, and individual transactions that are valued at over $100,000. So this was the highest amount since 2023. There were a few similar spikes in 2022, but regardless, this indicates that whales were very much active once the pump started. And even, this first leg up here on the 12th, there were some pretty huge fireworks going on the XRP network. Also of note, look at the 100,000 to 100 million XRP addresses. This is kind of the shark and whale equivalent to what we looked at for Bitcoin. And they've really been accumulating since going back to mid-February. You had this one small setback here, but other than that, right, you can kind of just draw a line and see how much accumulation has been going on. It isn't huge, right? It's only about like a 1% of the total supply, but these are the key stakeholders that are likely causing XRP's price to rise and fall. And obviously the price rose so much because of the decision yesterday, but it is being backed by the fact that large key stakeholders have a high confidence in the asset. Trading volume and transaction volume. Huge trading volume spike, not so much on the on-chain transaction end, but this trading volume spike was the highest in about 10 months. Generally speaking, if prices are rising and trading volume is rising into it, that means that the price trend could and should continue. Not always, but it's a good rule of thumb. If it's declining prices and trading volumes rising, that means the decline could continue. What you don't want to see is obviously that scenario, but you also don't want to see prices rise while trading volume is starting to shrink over time. That means that the trend is likely to be broken due to trader disinterest. But for now, it looks like trading volume, we'll take a look at it in real time in a moment, but at least on the daily candle, people were clearly trading into the rise. And then MVRV here too, through the roof. You can see 30-day traders were up an average of plus 24%, depending on where you're zoomed in. This screenshot even showed 31%, with 365-day traders up 43% or up to 52%. So yeah, this will not last, and there will be an event that will lead to XRP traders dropping their average trading returns back closer to zero at some point. But for now, they're sky high, which means there's a high risk of adding on to your holdings or opening a new position. So yeah, definitely check out that article. We definitely stand behind what's in it, and we think the info can be useful not just for XRP, but just to learn about how valuable these on-chain and social metrics can be for predicting future price movement. All right, so looking at transaction volume for XRP, we see the big spike that occurred at the top here, and then it started to fall. Let's add trading volume to this. Called volume on Santiment. Keep that at just 1 hour. And we'll zoom in just to the last month. So yeah, so I like this sign. See how the trading volume, even now on the 1 hour scale, it's still rising. There's more and more trading volume going on right now, even after the price retraced. I can zoom in even more. See how we had our top here around 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. It started to decline, but trading volume did not. It's continuing to just rise. Now it's rising slower than it was here. The exponential curve is starting to flatten out, but as long as trading volume is continuing to increase, reacting to this trend, I think that XRP could even have a little more room to run. Maybe not immediately, but after a little bit of a cool down period, let's see if trading volume stays up high along with some of the other metrics that we can look into. Daily active addresses. Yeah, we had a minor spike, but actually, surprisingly, it's nothing compared to some of the weird anomaly spikes that we saw back in late May or even late June, which could be just internal or founders' addresses being shifted around somehow. It's hard to say what's going on there, but yeah, this was a decent spike, but nothing really that special. Circulation, though, that was a pretty big spike. Uh, I would say this is more just a result of the mass reaction to the news, and it won't really tell much in terms of future price movement. All right, so taking a live look at MVRV, it's actually off the scale, but it's okay. Let's just look at the box that's going to appear over on the top left. So yeah, MVRV 30 days now up to 38%. The 365 days up to 79%. They were even higher here at one point yesterday, 91% for 365 and 53 for the 30-day. These are sky high numbers and they do need to come down. And it is very likely that average trader returns do give up some of their gains. Now, that doesn't mean that the price is going to drop. It could simply mean that there's so much FOMO of people buying at the top right now, buying over like 77 or 75 cents, that if it just drops down to maybe 70 cents or so temporarily, that could be enough to really make MVRV drop back down to a reasonable number that, you know, price can then resume upward again. So yeah, it's this is indicating that it's risky to be riding XRP at this current time, or especially adding on to your investment. But, you know, this is only one metric out of many and not investment advice by any means. Do what you are most comfortable doing. Funding rates, as you would expect, we have a bit of a long spike. We already touched on this model, how it is the one big outlier where it's seeing a big positive funding rate spike. So be weary of that. We would rather see people be fearful than be greedy right now. And then take a look at whale transactions, just absolutely soaring. If we go to the last year, largest by far, go to the last 2 years. So the last time we had a spike this high was December 2021, just to give you an idea. And that was actually right precisely at a big local top. So we're not saying the same thing is going to happen, but based on history, just be a little careful when you see this level of whale transactions. They can still, you know, occur at bottoms as well, like we saw kind of here. This was a decent example of a bottom, but either way, these big whale transaction spikes usually reveal that there could be a price direction shift. So keep that in mind. Let's move on to any other metrics that could potentially be helpful. We already touched on the tiers. I won't go too much into these. We even touched on the ratio of profit to loss being high, but not through the roof. Mean dollar invested age, this is an important one. We see, you know, regular little drops in XRP with dormant movement happening from time to time. But overall, it looks like this was not a big drop that happened here as a result of the price surge, at least not yet. We would need to really see that the mean dollar invested age curve is starting to fall. And if we see it like down here, that is the signal that we are about to hit a little bull run for XRP. So for now, it's kind of a wait and see moment. At least we're seeing a decent little drop here, but if it continues to go up, that might mean that this rally is a short-lived one for now. And then network realized profit loss. Yeah, we did see a spike, but it wasn't through the roof or anything. And I don't think this is too much of a concern. It happened right at the top, and then there was a retrace, and now network realized profit loss is kind of back in a neutral spot. And yeah, we touched on social dominance. You can even see here it jumped up to 15%. Uh, yeah, kind of the most recent 12-hour bar here. So that's a big deal as well, and really shows that the mainstream crowd is paying a ton of attention to XRP. Again, that's a bit of a concerning sign, not a great sign. And we'd like to see the crowd settle down and not be so aware of XRP's surge because it's causing a lot of FOMO, profit taking, and things that generally can push prices down. And even development activity, we're seeing a slight uptick, nothing too special here going on, but yeah, that's XRP, folks, and I wanted to make sure to do a segment on it, considering the massive amount of eyeballs that are on the asset at this time. Now, with that said, I would normally take questions, but as you guys can hear, I've got a little bit of a cough and I'm trying to preserve my voice. I think, Gary, what we can do is conclude it here. But if you guys have questions, leave them in the comments of this video, or you can message us on Discord. You can even ping me, just drop me an @Brian in any of our public channels. And I'm happy to help and go over some metrics and some assets that you have your eyes on. But in the meantime, I want to wish everyone a great weekend. Stay cool. I know summer is really starting to heat up here, and it's been super hot in areas around the world. And let's hope that the weather cools down, but the crypto markets stay hot, because I'd love to come back next week and talk about, 35K Bitcoin and $2,500 Ethereum, and XRP being over $1 again. That's obviously something we're always rooting for, but our goal is, of course, to be objective, not to give investment advice. And we're all here for the same reasons. We believe in crypto and we want to see it prosper. So let's touch base next week and see if we can report some more great news. Fingers crossed, and we'll talk to you all next week.